The Devil and the Three Sisters. A Tale of the Jersey Devil. "The devil lives in these woods," declared old Elemiah Wakefield from his rickety lopsided porch. "But I don't suppose you college girls will take heed." He steadied himself against a spindly, whitewashed post. "It's a common rumor that old Elemiah was born in this misplaced, weed-entangled bungalow he likes to call home. He's about as deep inside the Jersey Pine Barrens as a man can get, and it's fair to say that he never had any reason to leave. No one really knows the story, but the Wakefield family must have been here since before they kept records. Now, it seems, hoary Elemiah is the last living, rust-covered relic of his horse-drawn clan. Whatever the truth, the Park Service takes the presence of this one crusty old coot as tolerable. Strange as it sounds, maybe the Census Bureau doesn't want to bother with him, but Elemiah has a small gathering of worshippers who stop by time and again to hear his stories, mostly folklorists wanting to be entertained by his forest tales of ghosts, witches, and devils. Only one or two potential authors a year, but even so, it's company. Once this piney is dead, the Barrens will have one less living library. The college girls who stood in the middle of nowhere with Wakefield came from a hybrid type of paranormal society that's still in operation. It includes both believers and skeptics and is based just outside the local college. The society has no affiliation with the school, but the visitors who talk with Elemiah were professors at that university. Who knows if they still are? Interest in the supernatural had a serious hold on their minds, but it didn't change the fact that their diplomas claimed scientist status for each. And they were sisters. Not triplets, but they did look uncommonly alike, and as close as they came in appearance, that's how far apart they seemed in disposition. The one thing that tied them together, aside from their head-turning beauty, was their avocation for the inexplicable. About this time the year before, a party of deer hunters went missing in the pines, and except for their expensive rifles and gear, rangers found not a trace of them. The rescue was searched high and low, but no one ever heard from those trophy seekers again, just as if the ground opened up and swallowed them. Sinkholes existed as a possibility, as did alien abductions and falling into mini black holes, but no evidence for any of those unlikelihoods saw light. A jumbled assortment of boot impressions scuffed up the campsite, and there must have been chaos. The men scampered this way and that, almost as if they had been attacked from above and ran in blind confusion. Along with the hunters' prints were claw marks dug into the surrounding trees and hoof tracks, but the rangers didn't release that odd information to the public. What kind of bird or thing could have disappeared with a bunch of overweight beer bellies anyway? Elemiah knew about it because he heard the commotion at night and hobbled over to see about the ruckus. He reported the occurrence to the rangers, but still, what on earth did the old man actually witness? That's what brought the three investigators to Wakefield's door. They got wind of the incident's details through their society's channels, and it smelled like ripe pickings for them. "Have you ever seen an animal that doesn't belong in these parts?" asked Claudia Ventura, the youngest sister and a zoologist. She could identify practically every animal bone in existence, and for that matter, every bone in extinction. "Hard to say," answered the old man. "I hear things at night, like flapping wings, but big wings, bigger than any owl, and I see things moving in the twilight, never in the day. Then I hear stuff at night, bushes rattling, but I can't see too well in the dark. They don't sound like no deer nor turkeys. Sounds like humans walking. Ain't no one out here but me. In the day, there's claw scratches and weird hoof prints, like a big goat walking on two legs. It's curious." By the looks of him, the lecturing trio figured Elemiah must have been in his 80s. Raw-boned in his red flannel shirt, bent like a pried nail, and not too tall to begin with. He still had his hair, but it was a gray crop, matching his patchy beard. Some said he collected a mechanic's pension from the long-abandoned aircraft assembly plant in the adjacent county. He might have, because it sure took a lot of experience and ingenuity to make his place livable. "Do you believe in the supernatural or any of the folk tales of this area?" asked Sylvia, the oldest and an anthropologist specializing in folklore and legends. The old man's eyes bulged in mock fear. "You mean the Jersey Devil, young lady?" Wakefield asked in a shaky voice. Something about Sylvia, or Sylvia's question, tickled his funny bone. Probably something he detected about Sylvia herself. "Well, yes," Sylvia replied with a snip of annoyance, rising above his teasing. "Hooves, claws, pine lands. It kind of fits." Elemiah snickered. "You know, talking about it and believing it are two different things. If I said I believed in the Jersey Devil, at my age, people would claim I'm senile. I'm not commenting on that one. But I suppose that's why you're here. Tonight's the Hunter's Moon, which is when the alleged devil makes its scheduled yearly appearance. Brave girls." Elemiah shook his head in slight bewilderment. "Yes," Claudia answered, "I'm a zoologist, and quite frankly, rumor has it that some kind of animal or monster prowls these woods, doing all sorts of horrible things. Supernatural or not, I'd like to find out what that thing is." "And I'm an anthropologist studying folklore," Sylvia asserted, making sure she connected her last silly-sounding question to the rationale for asking it. "I would love to get to the bottom of the Jersey Devil legend." "And what's your specialty, Missy?" Wakefield asked the third woman. That courageous individual, Andrea, represented the sober side of the family, considering Sylvia. A geologist by training, Andrea wanted to poke around for sinkholes and investigate the unusual soil composition that could shed light on the disappearances. "I'm a geologist, sir," Andrea replied matter-of-factly. "I want to examine the terrain for sand pits and other hazards that may have befallen the hunters." "Befallen? Oh, that's one way to say it, I guess," Elemiah mumbled. "Well," he continued, "maybe the Barrens is haunted, or maybe a critter lurks in these woods that ain't natural. Either way, those hunters that vanished ain't the first and ain't the last. This forest is over 1 million square acres, and I guess anything is possible in something that big. If you three are dead set on getting to the root of it, ain't my business. Just so you know, your portable phones don't work out here. That's roughing it for you city girls, I guess. The trail to that damn campsite starts over here to the right of me. Just stay on the path and you'll walk into it." The old fossil grimaced. "Thank you for your help, sir," Claudia replied. "We hope to see you on our return. Goodbye for now." Elemiah waved his hand, and the siblings began walking on a rarely used, nearly invisible sugar sand trail. This gloaming path would take them a moderate distance away from the hermit's hut and to the place where the hunters vanished. Tripping and straining through shoelace-untying vines slowed the hike and worked up a sweat despite the cool October day. The sun bulged yellow behind the opaque cloud cover, almost looking like a boil under white skin. Brittle brown pine needles blanketed the forest floor, and nothing else really grew aside from prickly, widely spaced bushes. Claudia led the way. The tall, thin beauty, wearing bright, well-worn hunting clothes, had just reached middle age, but it didn't show. Curiosity and enthusiasm poured from her brunette eyes. Over the years, her hair had darkened from the golden blonde of her youth, but it wasn't really a big deal that the caramel coloring came from a bottle. She still had something to rev a man's heart. Sylvia came up to Claudia's chin, lean and pretty, but she lacked Claudia's focused mind. It took a certain breed to be a folklorist. She had the zoologist by a half-dozen years, appeared decidedly loopy but temporarily poised, and wore khaki hiking clothes. This rattle of bones looked like she'd run from dark shadows and from the spooks that lived in hollow logs. Everybody carried supplies and backpacks for at least one night of camping. This would be an unnerving expedition for the jumpy, jittery anthropologist. Andrea trailed her sisters, constantly stopping to examine the soil, looking for unusual rock configurations, and possibly finding telltale clues that could solve the mystery. The outdoor life of a geologist agreed with Andrea. She had an insatiable palate for sweets and junk food, but daily trips to the gym kept the weight off. She too wore hiking clothes and boots, and although she was never one to lean toward emotional displays, and was always scowling at the ordinary person's undignified behavior, Old Constipation Face seemed excited by this adventure. Figuring in all the stopping and clue searching, it took about an hour to get to the Hard Luck campsite. Wildlife seemed scarce, except for a few squirrels that scavenged for pine cones. The gnats and mosquitoes had left for the season, but the Venturas still had to worry about ticks. Claudia spied the trees for signs of owls or other large birds that could have accounted for the claw marks. A great horned owl weighs only 3 pounds, but it could exert enough force in its enraged talons to break a man's cervical bones. But it couldn't carry anyone away. I'm going to scout out the immediate area for possible sinkhole activity, the doe-eyed middle sister said. Supposedly it was already done, but I could also analyze soil samples for things the investigation team might have missed. Andrea couldn't wait to get her hands in the dirt and couldn't care less about a braided bark and dancing hooves. She dropped her enormous backpack like a sack of potatoes. The 3 researchers then pitched a large high-wall tent that they would all share, which would also function as a mini laboratory. The geologists at last trotted off toward the gray backdrop of the eerie trees. Claudia and Sylvia emptied their nylon backpacks, jammed with food, water, a microscope, and lab equipment. Hatchets, flashlights, and multi-tools dangled and clanked on their utility belts. Claudia then set out to look for animal tracks, scat, claw marks, and anything else that could put a name on the terror that continues to stalk these pines. Anything that could educate them about what happened to those missing hunters. Sylvia became Claudia's shadow, following so closely that they kept bumping into each other. "Please relax, Sylvia," Claudia grumbled. "Nothing is going to happen to us." "We shouldn't have come today," Sylvia whined. "There's evil here. I can feel it all around me. Can't you feel it? We'll never see the light of tomorrow. Let's just pack up and go home." "Sylvia, knock it off," Claudia hollered. "If you want to leave, take the trail and go now while it's still light. Meet us with the car tomorrow, although you're not behaving like a university professor." That comment stung Sylvia, and she calmed herself. "You're right, Claudia," Sylvia admitted. "I must get control of my imagination. I'll be fine." Claudia smiled reassuringly at Sylvia, and they both kept their doubts about Sylvia to themselves. "Then not another word of this," Claudia said. "Now tell me again the legend of the Jersey Devil." Sylvia took a deep breath and thought about where to start, then nodded. "Well, as the legend goes, the Jersey Devil is indigenous to the Pine Barrens. In 1735, a local resident named Jane Leeds, or Mother Leeds, had 12 children and learned that she was pregnant for the 13th time. She cursed the unborn in anger and frustration and cried out that the baby would enter the world as a demon. Jane Leeds went into labor on an unholy, stormy night under the hunter's moon. Her friends and family were in attendance. Though born normal, this 13th child instantly transformed into a creature with hooves, a freakish head, bat wings, a forked tail, and long arms with clawed fingers. It hissed and growled at them and killed the midwife before flying up the chimney and disappearing into the woods. In another version of the story, Mother Leeds supposedly practiced witchcraft, and the child's father is the devil himself. It's said that an attempted exorcism by local pastors failed. The willpower of the Pine Barrens creature proved too strong. It feeds on animal flesh, preferably human flesh. "Which version are you partial to?" Claudia asked. Sylvia shrugged indifference and smiled. The scientists spent the rest of the day gathering samples and specimens. Sylvia scrutinized the ground and trees for hand-drawn symbols that may have pointed to a satanic cult involved in a foul play. Coffee and protein bars translated into a working lunch for the paranormal detectives. At last, when the day receded to dusk, the intrepid trio returned to the small, natural clearing that they and the lost hunters used as a campsite. The sun turned red behind the clouds, and the filtered radiance converted the pewter landscape into a portrait of scarlet gloom. Imaginations could run wild in this place. A microscope, centrifuge, and tempered glassware made up the field lab. For on-the-spot analysis, and each instrument operated on a lithium battery. The detailed testing would wait until they got back to the university. Containers and flasks of formaldehyde, alcohol, and assorted solutions stayed ventilated on a foldable aluminum table left by the hunters or by someone who came afterwards. A wood-burning fire sputtered under Andrea's hot dogs and beans. Claudia's chicken pot pie and Sylvia's vegetarian quiche thawed out on a small propane stove. Fallen, rotten tree trunks provided seats. The vegetarian Sylvia became lightheaded, almost disoriented from the aroma of burning hot dogs. But Claudia didn't mind and snatched a wiener off the frying pan for herself. "Sometime tonight, the full hunter's moon will appear," Sylvia cautioned, "and that's when the devil will come." More than likely, Sylvia made that dramatic announcement to get her mind off the stink of burning meat or whatever hot dogs are made of. "Well, the clouds are clearing in the night chill, so I think the moon will shine," Claudia observed. "But the devil showing is another story. I haven't seen anything that would indicate anything larger than a deer pranced through the territory recently. There are hoof prints, but their patterns indicate quadrupedal movement. I see deep, wide gouges in some of the tree bark. They're stale and smooth, so they were probably made a year ago. An animal made them. That I know by the shapes and indents. They're about the size of what a black bear would make to sharpen its claws. So until I know more, I'd say a black bear strayed in the area. And it wouldn't eat every last human nugget. And honestly, I saw nothing in the way of the supernatural," Sylvia added. As Sylvia ate, she picked out the middle of her quiche and left behind the harder outer crust, the same way she left the crust around her bologna sandwiches when she was a kid. Andrea gobbled down her hot dogs and beans, burped, and said, "Well, I won't know anything until I look at a few of these samples. I have to treat them with reagents." She stood and walked into the tent. "Wait," Sylvia yelled. "I'll help you." And she followed her sister into the well-lit enclosure. Claudia seized the chance and devoured the remaining hot dogs and beans. Sylvia would rue snuggling between her two sisters tonight. A few hours later, the three women left the synthetic cabin and went outside, heated a pot of coffee on the stove, and sat. The air cooled further, and the rising full moon stained the twisting clouds orange. A soft mist seeped up from the ground. The moon broke through the wispy cirrus streaks, and the landscape turned amber. Just above the dark trees, the saffron orb, mottled by its shadowy mountains and craters, seemed to appear from a ghost story. Claudia gazed serenely at the spectral sky. Sylvia got the creeps, but didn't want it to be obvious. Andrea talked about her findings. "Well, earlier I walked around the campsite and spiraled out," she explained. "I carried my electrical resistivity tester to check for underground chambers that could become sinkholes. I covered quite a bit of ground, so I wouldn't miss anything. There are cavities here and there, probably the products of atrophied tree roots, underground. My soil samples revealed that the saline earth has a high concentration of carbonic acid in it. That's a warning for sinkhole possibilities. For all that, these possibilities did not amount to anything. I did not find strong enough evidence to support human beings disappearing underground. There aren't even depressed peat bogs. In other words, this ground is solid." Andrea halted her analysis and looked side to side. She sensed something was missing. "Where are my leftover hot dogs and beans?" Sylvia gawked at the moon, too afraid to answer, and Claudia glanced downward. Andrea then realized where the food went and shook her head at Claudia. "Health fanatic, my foot," Andrea muttered. "Sounds like a big turkey flying into the treetops," Claudia said, quickly changing the subject. The three at once realized the other possibility and became silent. Heavy leather flopped and flapped above them, then a figure silhouetted against the moon. Misshapen and black against the Titian light, the elongated winged form hovered only a few seconds, then vanished. Sylvia looked up, horror-stricken. "The devil! The devil!" she screamed. True to the word of the legend, Sylvia next whispered to herself, "The hunter's moon brings the lead's devil." Eyes focused on the direction of the labored fluttering, but the thing eluded sight. They stood and held their breaths. A clobbering thud, like two bodies colliding, heaved and lurched Andrea forward. The beast swooped down and grabbed her by the shoulders. Talons dug into Andrea's clothing, and the abomination lifted the geologist off the ground. Sylvia ran over and grabbed Andrea's feet before it carried the middle sister away. A brief tug of war ensued, but the monster pulled like a team of horses, and Sylvia lost her hold. Claudia unlashed her belt hatchet and flung it at the living hallucination with all her might. The blade penetrated deep into the chimera's skull. It bleated and dropped Andrea, then haphazardly flew away. The women ran over to Andrea. Her shoulders bled from the puncture wounds, but they could get her to her feet. "Is it dead, you think?" Andrea asked. "No, it will be back," Sylvia affirmed. The two helped Andrea into the tent to examine her injuries. "You're lucky," Claudia commented. "That cringe-worthy puffy vest saved you from serious injuries. The wounds are superficial, but fashion-wise, it killed you the first time you wore it." "Shut up, Claudia," Sylvia snapped. "Sorry, Andrea," Claudia apologized. "Just my nerves talking." "I'll be all right," Andrea said, brushing the dust and pine needles off her clothes. Now came the time for Sylvia to show her mettle. "We need protection," she stated to herself, and she ran out the door flaps. The puzzled sisters followed. Sylvia stabbed her knife into the desiccated sandy ground, then dragged it until the scraped line formed a large, reasonably round circle in the clearing. The other two watched intently. Inside the circle, Sylvia etched the outline of a star, with the points extending to the ring's edge. In the spaces between the star points, she drew cryptic symbols, or more like forgotten letters from a murky, bygone day. She worked in haste, as if she knew the devil would return any minute. The siblings understood Sylvia's way of thinking. When the folklorist finished, she said, "Quick, into the circle, and don't disturb the words or break the lines." The former doubters entered the circle like two shots. "We're in a devil's trap," Sylvia explained. "That devil can't breach the charm barrier. If we stay inside, we're safe." "How long?" Claudia asked. "Until sunrise," Sylvia replied. "This is an ancient defense against demons. I took it from a sorcery tome called The Lesser Key of Solomon. Just reading it scared the pants off me. My dissertation focused on Ars Goetia, the first volume of the work. That's where I learned about the devil's trap." Fear and uncertainty left Sylvia. The timid, eccentric member of the family became its guardian angel. An hour passed and nothing happened. "Maybe it's dead," Claudia remarked. "That axe must have sunk right into its pea brain." "It's not dead," Sylvia asserted. "It's thinking up a plan. The thing didn't expect a head full of steel, and another strategy is being considered. Something will happen before the light of dawn." Footsteps crunching on the forest litter spun the startled sisters' heads. They stared into the blackness to see what walked up the trail, and by the pale of the setting moon, they recognized grizzled Elemiah. He moved like any 80-year-old man, pained and winded. "Hey, girls," he called out. "I heard the fuss. Are you three all right?" He walked up to the engraved dirt ring and looked down. "What are you doing? Playing some sort of foreign hopscotch?" "It's a long story," Claudia said. "You're in danger, Mr. Wakefield. Please step into this circle for protection. The Jersey Devil or some sort of demon is stalking us. This circle will prevent it from reaching us." "And they call me crazy," the geezer scoffed. "Come on with me, girls. We'll go back to my house, and you'll be safe from any hair-raising demons. Then you three can get the hell out of the forest come daylight." "We're not leaving this sigil until morning," Sylvia stated. "You are in grave danger, sir. Please come into the circle for safety." "Girls," Elamaya pressed, "come along now. These woods ain't no place for city folk. You imagine things, run around like chickens with their heads chopped off, and then get hurt." Something about Wakefield's dogged argument made Sylvia suspicious. "We'll go with you, but I insist you first step across the line into the circle." Elamaya squinted and shook his head. "I had enough of this nonsense," he fired. "Let's get going. My old bones need to rest, and this standing and arguing is aggravating my arthritis." "Not until you step into the circle," insisted Sylvia. The old man paused a moment and gave a queer smile, then let out a scream that could freeze water. As he did, a bolt of lightning struck the ground behind him, blinding the girls for a few seconds. Thunder shook the trees. Their vision cleared to the sight of frail Elamaya transforming. His body grew tall and towering, and fleshy wings sprouted from his back. His lower half became that of a satyr's, hooved and furry, and his arms stretched long, and the youth's hands grew claws. A pointed tail twitched, but Wakefield's face looked the most hellish, like a horned gargoyle with fangs dripping saliva. Satan dipped every inch of him in sable ink. Andrea ran from the sigil trap, grabbed a beaker of formaldehyde, and threw it in the monster's face. The mutated Wakefield snarled, shook it off, then charged after Andrea, who made it back safely into the circle. That dual-life demon must have been 7 feet tall, all bone and sinew, and strong beyond ordinary reason. The thing picked up a fallen tree trunk and threw it directly at the sisters, but it bounced off an unseen force that projected around the mystical shelter. Claudia threw a rock at the beast and hit it flush in the face. It seemed that good actions and good intentions could leave, but evil couldn't enter. Not a thing Elamaya touched had the ability to penetrate the shielding. The determined devil bellowed, whooped, threatened, and circled the trap like a starving wolf. He thought with the mind of a predator, to scare one of them out of the circle so he could satisfy his hunger. The girls knew better, and no one budged. Then he just flew off without another word. "What do you make of that?" Andrea asked. "It's planning something," Sylvia surmised. "It's smart, and it still has a few hours before dawn. Expect the worst." Claudia swore. Then she twisted a leg off the portable table. She pulled out a roll of clothy white medical tape from her jacket pocket and wrapped a knife around the end of the table leg. It didn't appear more than 3 feet long, but it felt as sturdy as any javelin. "I'm ready if it returns." Resolve punctuated her words. "A spear can't hurt it," Sylvia said. "It'll feel pain if I shove this down its throat," Claudia spat. The endless night crawled, but Elamaya did not show in any form, man or mutant. "It's almost dawn," Andrea commented. "It has to make a move now." A putrid stench, like that from the inside of a slaughterhouse, suddenly overwhelmed the pine-scented air, and the sound of beating wings returned. The devil loomed over the trees, then slowly lowered itself. The moon had set, and the pre-dawn lay over the women's eyes like a casket cover. The lead's child hovered close to the circle, near the ground, and drummed its wings with all its fury. Powerful gusts came from the flapping, and dirt and debris blew into the incised lines. The devil's trap had no defense and began yielding its power. As soon as it faded enough, the sisters would be at the mercy of the rapacious nightmare. Anguish filled the siblings, and they backed away. In moments, the circle nearly disappeared, and the star and arcane letters lost their effect. Elamaya touched the ground, then gingerly extended its claw toward the barrier. No buffer. The beast's dark outline reared up and howled. Then its faint form stomped toward the sisters. It laughed. A feast on the plate, finally. 3 skinny sisters, but they would do. The brute sniffed the adrenaline in their sweat. By and by, the monster rasped. It stood so close they could smell its gamey hide and taste its fetid breath. Claudia gripped the spear and charged the wretch. The short lance thrust through the cur's stomach like a rhino's horn through the ribs of a threatening hyena. She lifted her foe, and their momentum sent it crashing into a tree. The shaft didn't stop until half the blade pierced the trunk. The devil was stuck, just like a needle pinning a struggling hornet. The monster blinked, astonished. Black bile dripped from the wound. He hissed and thrashed, but he couldn't go anywhere. Andrea grabbed her hatchet and hurled it, planting the business end in the fiend's ugly face. Now we're even, she said in satisfaction. The spawn of Satan hung still, either dead or unconscious, pretending more likely. The 3 at last saw a pink glow along the treetops, announcing the long-awaited dawn. Then they turned toward the devil, and it had already departed. The spear still impaled the tree, but the hatchet lay on the ground. There was no sign of black blood, but a gut feeling said they were out of danger. Not a clue to be had, Andrea groused, looking around the campsite. You saved us, sis, Claudia said to Sylvia. When you had to, you really passed the muster, you little scaredy cat. Sylvia felt proud of herself and beamed. They spent a few more minutes looking for any traces of the devil, but there was nothing, not so much as a hair from its hide. Frustrated, they bundled their gear and headed down the path that would lead them past the creature's place and to their car. Wakefield and the Jersey Devil are one and the same, Sylvia giggled. But who would ever believe that? Whoa, what if he's waiting for us when we get back to his shack? Claudia whimpered. Andrea's eyes bugged out. Don't worry, Sylvia assured. In the light of day, without the hunter's moon, he won't transform. Or can't. I'm not sure about that detail. Either way, at this moment we're safe. Besides, I think he's still licking his wounds from his encounter with the 3 Ventura sisters. The demon world now knows to stay away from us if it knows what's good for it. Sylvia's sisters didn't comment and walked on in unconvinced silence. When they got to Elamiah's small cottage, they almost jumped out of their skins. There he was, old Scratch himself, standing on his porch, the picture of amity and octogenarian feebleness. He kept staring at the approaching girls, cackling like a crazy goose. They had no choice but to pass him. They didn't get too close, and he stayed put. He had his chance last night and let it slip away. Just as the sisters came nearest to him that they would dare get, old Elamiah declared, I told you the devil lives in these woods.